Welcome to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers, for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend. Please join us in episode 4 as we discuss the importance of structure, what it is, and how to implement it in your home with your dog. Okay. Now, here we go. Another one that I hear a lot is the word rules. So they'll say, you got to give your dog rules because, we're taught at a very, surface level that like humans love rules and kids love rules, and it actually makes them thrive, right? And we understand this intellectually because we're like, true. But then more as I think about it, I realized like as a kid, like I hated rules. So I'm thinking like in my mind, I'm like, what is it that people really interpret rules to be? And interviewing my clients, some of them say things like, oh, well, rules are things that are unacceptable behaviors, right? So your dog will not jump, your dog shall not sleep in bed. Your dog shall not, eat your food, eat human food. Your dog shall not beg, right? And so these ideas of rules, what I'm picking up from a lot of my clients is that rules tend to be only focused on what the dog shouldn't be doing. What's an unacceptable behavior that the dog is focused on, right? And dog trainers, we see this all the time where, so many times I have to tell a client like, praise your dog for what he did right. Praise your dog for what he's doing right. Also praise your dog for the absence of bad behavior, which is also important. And a lot of times our brains just get focused on what the dog shouldn't be doing versus on what the dog is doing or guiding the dog to do something that is more acceptable. Right? Anything you want to riff on with that?
No, I think you covered that beautifully.
Cool. Now, when dog trainers talk about rules, there's going to be two paradigms, right? Yes, rules are going to be things that are unacceptable behavior. So we need to make sure we're constantly putting a block or opposition in areas that we know the dog can't indulge in eating a sock or the dog can't kill the cat, right? We have to have rules, right? But also another part of rules are something I like to call preventative principles. Okay. So preventative principles, I'll explain it to you like this. A lot of my clients, they come to me and they go, Brent, okay, training's great, awesome, but just want to know what command do I use when the dog is in a fight with another dog, right? Like the dog's already over the edge.
Right.
Or one that's more common is like, what command do I use to tell my dog to not steal food off the counter? Right? Something super specific. And they want a very crystal clear command like off, and they want that to be an automatic response. And the problem is that if your dog finds the opportunity to jump on your counter when no one's looking because there's a juicy steak on there, a young puppy, an untrained dog is going to go for it, right? If they have a really high food drive, right? And so a preventative principle is a rule that's put in place to prevent the dog from failing, right? So what I'll tell people is I'll tell them, unfortunately, there isn't a command for that. However, if you teach your dog to not be in the kitchen when food is out, you will never run into that circumstance. Right? Some people will also ask questions like, how do I get my dog to start bolting out the front door? Well, there are certain preventative principles that we need to put into place as very firm rules that the family also needs to be disciplined in. So that way the dog knows what to do before the ability to make the wrong decision was ever presented to them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's basically, a big one for people is my dog jumps on guests when they come to the house, and then, place command is a great one. Put your dog in place. That's a preventative principle. He can't jump without first breaking place.
100%. 100%. What's another one? What's another word that we hear a lot, Mariano?
In terms of structure, obedience. Yeah. Obedience is a good one.
Yep. Want to riff on that a little bit?
Sure. Well, I think, it kind of ties back to what we started with, that people know what obedience is. I think that the average owner in, today's world with iPhones and internet and all that stuff, that they know what training looks like, but they don't quite understand it for more than face value. It's like, okay, well, my dog knows how to sit now. He knows how to lay down now. He knows how to do these things. When the real magic of obedience, again, is in the continued work. It's building repetition. It's building habits. Habit forming is a huge aspect of structure.
Right. Right. And a lot of things that I see in obedience, as you mentioned, like people kind of look at the surface value of obedience, right? I'll get phone calls all the time where people will be like, "Hi, I'm just calling about dog training." And they preface the whole conversation where they say, "My dog is really sweet. He's really
Right.
great. We've had him for 3 years, and he's really amazing and super affectionate, and he's really obedient, and he rolls over, he gives paw, he like shakes, and he's like a really good listener." And then I'll ask them and I'll say, "So what's the problem?" And they'll go, "Well, he bites people." Right. My dog is aggressive, or my dog
Right.
lunges at other dogs.
Right.
Right.
He can't stop murdering children. But other than that, he's yeah.
He can't stop murdering or chasing skateboarders. Right. And so what we kind of see is we kind of see again this confusion or like this misinterpretation of what obedience is. So let's go ahead and break down for the audience when a dog trainer says obedience versus when a dog owner thinks their dog is obedient, what we're really talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I like to break it down in is I like to break it down into 3 phases, right? Obedience has stages to it. Okay. We call one the shaping. So like we shape a behavior that we want, or we develop it, that we develop the skill. That's stage number 1. Stage number 2 is where we condition that skill to be called upon at any time. Right. So all of a sudden, my dog's running around, and while he's in the middle of a distraction, I say, "Come." And the dog has to learn to do that immediately when there's distraction. Or if I tell the dog to all of a sudden lay down and stay, I want to make sure that I can call upon that at any time and demand that. And the only way we get there is through repetition, repetition, repetition,
Right.
and reminder and guidance and reward, right? Reminder, guidance, and reward. And then the third stage is actually where the dog can do it as a job, right? Where the dog does the behavior either automatically or is almost anticipating what you're going to ask at any given time. And to us, this is what obedience training is. We're trying to teach our dog a skill. We're trying to develop that skill to be so strong that it works around distractions. And then we also want to develop that even further, where the dog now takes that skill that we developed and he takes it as a responsibility in the context that we've trained him to do it.
Right.
Right. And this is how people who are able to do like competitions, right? And they're able to do competition work with, 2,000 people in the audience. This is how police dogs are able to, hone in on the target, even though there's gunfire and helicopters and all these things going on, because the dog has been practiced and regimented and disciplined in these environments to be able to perform that behavior. Right. And
Right.
what I'm seeing a lot is people are just taking obedience commands for face value. In essence, they're just kind of taking them as a trick. My dog can do a trick, but my dog doesn't listen to me.
Can I give a quick I don't wanna get too off base here,
Hmm.
but, my jujitsu instructor, he does a podcast, and it mostly has to do with jujitsu, and one of my favorite episodes of his was his very last one, and it was to compete or not to compete.
Hmm.
And I'm not suggesting necessarily that you compete in obedience with your dog, but the message was this: the phases are all the same. There's shaping in, when you're learning a new skill or learning a new guard or a new type of thing, there's a really slow, really, intricate shaping moment where the instructor rather, they sit with you and they make sure that you know every little hand placement and you do everything, and it's super slow. This is not live action.
Right.
Then there's then there's like the expectation. There's drilling. Now that we know, now we're gonna roll actively, and I'm trying to do it while this guy's trying to avoid it, and we're going
Right.
at it. But an interesting thing is active rolling, even though it's full on rounds, it's very different than competition.
Right.
And the thing about competition is while you don't have to do it to get benefit from jujitsu, if you want to get the absolute utmost benefit, meaning more than just what you learn on the mats, jujitsu does crazy things for you all throughout your life.
Right.
Competing is a good way to go because you learn things about yourself. You learn how hard to push, you learn when to kind of relax, you learn how to ease up on the anxiety or, the kind of pregame angst because you see the other guy over there and he's like ready to go. And, there's all these fun little things that you learn when you're under pressure. And that's kind of what the third phase of obedience is. Now that the dog is shaped and he's ready to go and we can really expect things out of him reliably,
Hmm.
then you start upping pressure to make sure that the dog knows how to cope because that's almost a completely separate skill set than just knowing how to sit in and of itself.
Right. I totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. And I mean, you just described a really awesome pattern of how you go from being a novice, you develop a skill, you drill that skill, you practice it, and then you go ahead and actually learn to do it in real time, right?
Right.
And as dog trainers, that's constantly what we are trying to teach our clients, and it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Right? And dog training is not easy. Teaching a dog to roll over is easy. Teaching a dog to roll over on a stage in front of 300 people on
Right, right,
America's Got Talent, that takes repetition. That
right.
takes skill. That
It's
takes
almost not even
practice.
the same thing.
Not even, right? I was watching John Wick Part 3, and you guys all know, if you guys watch John Wick Part 3, you totally know that Belgian Malinois scene. Those dogs were years and years of training.
Yeah,
So anyways, I don't want to get off topic because I love that movie. But
yeah. Halle Berry had to go through all kinds of training just to handle the dogs.
yeah, exactly. And just to be able to speak that language and to talk fluently
Mm.
and et cetera, right? It's really cool. Shout out to John Wick, Keanu Reeves. Anyways, thank you for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers for dog trainers or anyone who's ever fallen in love